Hi guys, welcome back to Honest Straightforward Reviews. I've been meaning to do this review for a really long time, so for subscribers who've been waiting for this, thank you so much. And for people who are new to this channel, guys, I am a one-man show, so for me to go and spend $2,000 on each of these GPUs and get them out to you costs a lot. I hope you appreciate this. Let's get this review started. Now, normally what I would do is I'll talk about the physicalities of these cards and all the other aspects, so I am going to skip that this time. I will mention that few things on it though. The few things that I do want to mention is the Aorus Master, a lot bigger card. So it's longer, it's thicker, and it's a bit cooler as well. Those of you guys who need a smaller card, PNY might be a good alternative. However, the Aorus Master, on average that I tested it on for my everyday use where I do AI work, where I game on it, all this stuff, I gave them the same sort of undervolting, the same sort of overclocking, the same aggressive fan curve. I saw the Aorus Master around 40 degrees, whereas I see the PNY at about 50. So there's a massive 10-degree difference on the cards, on the same system, same sort of things, clean installed, all of this stuff. So that's that. Now let's go on to the spec sheet that I've got for you guys. The first spec sheet. Now, by the way, if you guys want to see the unboxing of these, I've got that on the channel. I'll try and link them here. Otherwise, you can have a look. I've got an independent review of these, not a head-on comparison. So if you guys want to see an unboxing of that, or me going in more of an in-depth of the physicalities of the card, the coolers and all that, the PCB, you'll need to watch those videos. I'll try and link them as well for you. Now, first slide I got for you guys is basically the GPU clocks and specs. Now, looking at this for your convenience, I've got the Founders Edition 4080 and the Founders Edition 4090 here as well. As you guys can see, there's absolutely nothing in them. They're exactly the same. The CUDA cores, ray accelerators, ROMs, the core clocks. The only thing that is of note here is the boost clock. So you'll see that the Founders Edition 4080 gets boosted up to 2505, which is the exact same as the PNY RTX 4080. However, the Aorus Master goes up to 2550 megahertz. So a 45 megahertz difference. Okay, so the next slide I have for you guys are the memory and specs. So looking at the memory and specs, again, it's the exact same story. You're not going to see any differences here between all three variants of the card. Looking at the next comparison where you will be seeing differences is the noise level. So for the fans, when they're being used relative to temperature. Okay, so this is basically how hot does it get when and where the fan noise goes to. So let's start with idle. So these all have now got fan stop. So the fan stop technology, when it's not being used, they hover around about 37 to 35 degrees, down to 35 degrees, and the fans are stopped. Okay, so that's for idling. When we go on to gaming, we'll see that the coolest is the Founders Edition, 63 degrees, and when gaming, the GPU hotspot still is the coolest in the Founders Edition. However, looking at the VRAM, which is very interesting, the Aorus Master is at only 44 degrees, and the rest are around well over 60 degrees. Looking at the sound, the lowest are the Founders Edition and Aorus Master when it comes to noise, because the Aorus Master, it's got a 4090 almost as big as a 4090 cooler on there. All right, the PNY is a bit noisier, and that can be seen in the fan speed. Looking at the fan speed, the lowest fan speed was for Aorus Master. They really had the fans running really cool. The next slide I have for you guys is the power consumption test. So looking at all of these cards at idle, they take about the same 14 to 15 watt. When we go to 2-monitor test, they're between 23 to 25 watt. Playing video games, they go from 20 to 23 watt. Playing with videos, that is. Going to gaming, the Founders Edition goes to a whopping 304. The PNY is the highest at 318. To my surprise, the Aorus Master sat 251. When we're doing ray tracing, the Aorus Master and PNY go higher than the Founders Edition. The max that I saw them spiking up to and staying up there is about 300 watts for the Aorus Master, which is really good. It's not really high. Whereas for the PNY, it was 324 and 316 for the Founders Edition. Looking at VSync at 60 Hz, I saw that the Founders Edition was quite economical at 68 watt. And when we go on to transient spike with a 20 millisecond difference in there, we saw that the Aorus Master was the lowest again, with the other two cards being the same. Let's go to Basemark 3D and Gigabyte GPU benchmark. Looking at Vulkan, we see them all basically performing the same, although the Aorus Master had a tiny bit of a lead, with the PNY being the last one in there. Looking at DirectX 12 test, again the PNY lagged behind both cards and the Aorus Master was just a tiny bit ahead of everything. So that 45 megahertz might be helping it a little bit, but I can tell you guys this, in this day and age, especially with the 40 series cards, Nvidia has pushed them so far ahead and so well with such good coolers that they haven't left much for the AIBs to improve upon, which we can see during these tests. And I'll give you my verdict in the end between these really good ranged cards, because the Aorus Master is the high-end card with all the bells and whistles such as R-RGB LED lights, and the PNY is a very basic copy of a Founders Edition with a cheaper cooler on there. Even everything on there is really plastic and made cheaply. Going on to OpenGL 4.5, we see the same thing. The Aorus Master is ahead, the PNY is the last one there. The next test I have for you guys is Blender benchmark testing the compute render performance. So in Classroom, we see again the same story as the last slide. Aorus Master first, Founders Edition second, PNY lagging behind, and that is the same sort of story when we go to Junk Shop and Monster. We see the same. However, telling you guys, there's not much between them. When we go to Indigo Supercar slide, we see the differences between the cards. The PNY is the most behind out of 3 cards. Looking at Unigine Heaven benchmark, looking at the frames per second. So looking at the frames per second, there's not much between the Aorus Master and Founders Edition. The Aorus Master is ahead by 3 frames, but that is at a really high frame rate at 300. 3 frames at, let's say, 60 frames would have been a massive difference, but at such high rates, there's not much. However, there is a tiny bit of a difference, a bit of a more of a difference between the Aorus Master and PNY. Again, at this high end, it's not noticeable when you're gaming. Next test I have for you guys is Unigine 2 Superposition, and I've done this benchmark in DirectX 11. We can see again the same story. There's not much in the card. The Aorus Master is ahead so far at each and every one of those tests, and the PNY right at the end of each one of those tests. Looking at Time Spy, that's by 3D Mark, and that's a DirectX 12 test. Looking at an overall score, we saw that the Founders Edition was ahead of them all, with the PNY being the most behind out of the 3 cards. However, when we move to just looking at the graphic score, the Aorus Master edges out just a tiny bit ahead of Founders Edition, whereas the PNY is in the last of them anyways, is the last card in there still. Next benchmark I have for you guys is 3D Mark Fire Strike, and this is an ultra benchmark in DirectX 11, and again we see the same sort of story. There's not much in there. These scores are quite high, so you wouldn't feel much of a difference in between them. Looking at Port Royale, it's a ray tracing test. Here we again see there's not much of a difference, although the Aorus Master has a bit of a lead, especially over the PNY one by 3 frames. This you won't see much of a difference, but this is nice to see. When we get into the gaming test, I have gone out of my way to ensure that you guys get 1% lows. I want you guys to, throughout the test, whether I point them out or not, please pay special attention to the 1% lows between these cards. That way it'll be telling you how much stress they're under. So if they're really stressing out and their cooler isn't forming, they'll have a lot more dip. Looking at full path ray tracing in DirectX, so we again see the same story here with Aorus Master up top with 90 frames. First game, let's get into the gaming benchmarks. First game I have for you guys is the Callisto Protocol, and that with the first slide I have is at 2K with RT off. So what I'll do is I'll go through RT off first, then we'll do an RT on test, which will be a shorter test with not as many games, but it'll give you an idea and breakdown of what to expect between these cards. Here we see an identical score between all 3 cards. They're doing really good. They have the same exact score. When we go to Callisto Protocol 4K, again we see the same sort of story. The PNY is a bit behind the other 2 cards in the average, but the 1% low is just about the same. Looking at COD Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, we see that the Aorus Master is at 222 frame average, which quite a bit ahead compared to the PNY 4080. When we look at the 1% lows, again it's an improvement of 3 frames in the 1% lows as well for the Aorus Master. Looking at 4K, we see that the Aorus Master again has a 3 frame increase and a 1 frame different in the 1% low, although that can be attributed to whenever there's a 1% low difference, we can attribute that to margin of error. Okay, looking at Cyberpunk at 2K, we saw the Aorus Master with a respectable 111. Looking at the 1%, so that's 111 frames, and that's an increase of 6 frame average on the PNY, and also a 2 frame increase in the 1% low, which is quite good. Looking at 4K, there's an issue I'm facing with a bug in the 4080 with Cyberpunk, and the averages just drop on this card when I play 4K. I've done everything, I've updated to the most recent updates. I don't know what's wrong, but take this one with a grain of salt. So the Aorus Master was really behind it. It's so far behind that it was just ahead of a 3080 Ti. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Here I have tested Formula 1 2022 with the Singapore wet settings on, and at 2K we saw all of the cards basically the same, just the 1% low. Interestingly, here for the Aorus Master was really low at 82 compared to 91 for the other two cards. So that's not good enough. That's really bad, but I think that's more of a bug for the card, I think. Let's go on to the next test. So looking at 4K for the same test, we see that here the Aorus Master corrected itself, and there's a 2 frame increase on the 1% low when compared to the PNY, and a 1 frame average increase. The next game I have for you guys is Hitman 3, and at 2K we see a 4 frame difference between the PNY and Aorus Master, and 1 frame increase in the 1% low. So the Aorus Master wins this one as well. Going on to 4K, the Aorus Master has an impressive 3 frame increase, both in the 1% lows and the average. Going on to Halo Infinite at 2K, we see a 4 frame average increase for the Aorus Master. However, the 1% low is quite stable at 121 for both hard. Going to 4K, we see a bit of a difference, a drop off of about 2 frames both in the 1% lows and the next game I have for you guys is called Hunt Showdown, and at 2K we've got a 10 frame difference between the Aorus Master and the PNY. The Aorus Master comprehensively is ahead, and also in the 1% lows it's comprehensively ahead of the PNY. When we go to 4K, we again see that margin diminish. However, it's still ahead by 3 frames and 2 frames in the 1% low. The Aorus Master in the next game, Far Cry 6, is ahead by about 7 frames in an average and about 6 frames in 1% lows, which is quite impressive. That's a good enough improvement in there, considering how good Nvidia made their GPUs in this round with their coolers and whatnot. Looking at 4K, we have basically the same kind of result. The only difference is in the average, where the Aorus Master is a tiny bit ahead by 2 frames. Going on to Assassin's Creed Valhalla 2K, we see a 6 frame difference both in the 1% lows and the average for this game between these two cards. So the Aorus Master being on top. However, when we move to 4K, we see a flip, and we see the PNY doing a lot better. So the PNY is 3 frames ahead in the average and 5 frames ahead in the 1% lows, which is quite impressive. Next game I have for you guys is Dying Light Stay Human, which is Dying Light 2, and in 2K we have a 3 frame improvement in the average and 2 frame improvement in the 1% lows. When we go to 4K, we have a 1 frame difference in the average and 2 frame in the 1% lows. Next game I have for you guys is Horizon Zero Dawn. In this game we have a 10 frame difference between these two cards, and in the 1% low there's a 7 frame difference, which is quite impressive. The Aorus Master is quite good at this game. When we go to 4K for Horizon Zero Dawn, we see a 4 frame difference in the average and a 2 frame difference in the 1% low, giving this game to Aorus Master as well. The next game I have for you guys is Forza Horizon 5 at 2K, where the Aorus Master leads by 2 frames in the average, but the 1% lows are the same. Going on to 4K, there's a 1% difference between the average. However, there's a 2 frame increase for the Aorus card when compared to the PNY. Next game is Watchdog Legions at 2K. There's a 4 frame average difference and a 1 frame difference in the 1% lows. At 4K, we have an increase of 5 frames in the average and 4 frames in the 1% lows, which is again quite impressive. The next game I have for you guys is Rainbow Six Extraction in Vulkan. This was tested in Vulkan at 2K. We have got an increase of 14 frames for the Aorus Master, and we have a 3 frame improvement in the 1% low. When we move to 4K, we see a 4 frame increase in the average, but the 1% lows are the same. The next game I have for you guys is Resident Evil 3 Remake, and that's in DirectX 12 as well. When we compare the average, we see that the Aorus Master leads by 13 frames, and when we go to the 1% lows by 5 frames. So that's quite impressive. When we go to 4K, we see that the difference between the average is 7 frames and the 1% low is 3 frames, which is still quite impressive. The next game is the Outer Worlds 2K. There's a 15 frame increase for the Aorus Master over the PNY and a 4 frame increase for the 1% low. When we go to 4K, there's still an improvement for the Aorus Master with 3 frames and 2 frames for the 1% low. The next game I have for you guys is Total War Warhammer 3, and at 2K we have a 1 frame improvement, while looking at the 1% low there's a 2 frame improvement for the Aorus Master. When we look at the 4K results, there's not much in there for these cards. They're about the same with a 1 frame difference in the average. Next game I have for you guys is Control. At 2K we see a 2 frame difference in the average, and that is increased to 3 frame difference for the Aorus Master when we go to the 1% low. So the Aorus Master has been leading in almost 90% of the tests I've done so far. There were a few that were a bit buggy, but there was one that the PNY just outright beat it. In 4K we see the same sort of results. The Aorus Master is ahead by 3 frames and again 3 frames 1% low. The next game I have for you is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. At 2K we see an improvement of 11 frames, while the 1% low has an improvement of 6 frames, and at 4K we see a 2 frame improvement in the average, where there's a 4 frame increase in the 1% lows. The last game I have for you guys is The Witcher 3. At 2K there's a 4 frame difference between these two cards, and the same 4 frame difference goes through to the 1% lows, which is quite impressive as well. When we go to 4K we see a 4 frame difference between the average of these two cards and a 2 frame increase for the Aorus Master for the 1% low. Okay, that last slide concludes. As always, if you guys are returning to this channel, Witcher 3 is the last game that I test on everything, and that's the last game, and that concludes our non-RT testing. Let's go on to the RT testing. Looking at RT first, game I have for you guys is Deathloop. Now in Deathloop I've got the 4K results in blue, while I've got the green in 2K results. They're basically the same. The only improvement the Aorus Master offers is in 4K with 1 frame margin of error increase. Next game I have for you guys is Cyberpunk 2077 with a 1 frame increase for the 4K and a 3 frame increase 2K with RT turned on. Next game with RT turned on is Control, where we see the exact same sort of result for both of them at 45. However, there's a 3 frame improvement when we go to 2K for Control game. Far Cry 6, we see there's a 2 frame improvement for 4K, while the same 2 frame carries on to 2K improvement for the Aorus Master as well. Next game I have for you guys is Resident Evil Village. At 4K we see a 3 frame improvement for the Aorus Master, while there's a 5 frame improvement 2K. Formula 1, again Singapore wet with RT turned on, we see the cards exactly the same at 4K at 59 frames. However, at 2K we see a 2 frame improvement for the Aorus Master. Next game is Watch Dogs Legions, and in this game we see a 2 frame improvement for the Aorus Master in 4K, and again that 2 frame carries over to 2K as well. Next game I have is Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition with RT turned on. We see a 3 frame improvement for the 4K and 2K result. The last 2 games I have for you guys are with the 1% lows. I thought it takes a lot of time to get the 1% low tested and get those results and incorporate them, so I didn't want to just leave it out completely, so I've included them for this as well. So looking at the average, we see at 2K Resident Evil 3 Remake with RT turned on, we see a 14 frame improvement for the Aorus Master, while there's still a respectable 7 frame improvement in the 1% lows. When we go to 4K, we see these margins reduced, especially for the 1% low, where there's just a 1 frame difference for the Aorus Master. However, there's a 4 frame improvement in the average frame. The last game I have for you guys is Hitman 3 with RT turned on. At 2K we see a 4 frame increase for the Aorus Master for the average and a 1 frame increase for the 1% low. When we go to 4K we see the same 1% low, however the average is 2 frames improvement for the Aorus Master. Now let's look at what this means. Now looking at the 20 games that I've tested with RT off, we can see the Aorus Master on average has over a 6 frame improvement on average over the PNY card. When we go to the 1% low, it has a very respectable almost 12 frame improvement when we compare to the PNY card. Again, this is quite impressive, guys, especially given how good Nvidia made their Founders Edition card when compared to the AIB. So the AIBs don't have much wiggle room for them. When we go on to the 4K average for the 20 games with RT turned off, we see about a 2 frame improvement for the Aorus Master and about just under a 1 frame margin of error, 1% low improvement for the PNY card. So not much if you're gaming at 4K with these cards. Now let's look at the best card when it comes to cost per frame with RT turned off. Okay, so these are Australian prices. I do Australian only. If you're new here, I am in Australia, so everything gets done in Australian currency. So looking at 4K, the Aorus Master costs almost $1.50 extra per frame. So the frame improvements we're talking about cost more as well. When we go to, so if you're gaming at 4K, you actually lose out with the Aorus Master because it's costing you more. However, there's not much of an improvement at all, especially in the 1% lows as well. When we go to the PNY card, when we look at the 2K, there's still that difference. It's just under $1 per frame difference. However, there is a difference. But when we look at the cards, the Aorus Master does a bit better when it comes to those frame improvement. However, if I was choosing between these two cards based on cost and based on performance, then I would easily recommend the PNY. The only thing I'd like you guys to be mindful of is the massive heatsink that the Aorus Master's got on a TCB, meaning it's a lot cooler, and I have seen that without all these testing scenarios, just in everyday usage when I'm just gaming and things like that. 10-degree difference. That is massive. That is massive for a card that's of the same generation, of the same build, of the same kind, and everything is the same. The only thing that is different is the cooler. So that is quite impressive for those two cards. Now let's look at the 10 game difference with RT on. First, we look at the 4K. There's not much of a difference when we look at 4K. There is just about a 2 frame improvement for the Aorus Master, and that improvement goes to just about 4 frames when we go on to 2K. That's a 10 game average. Let's look at RT and look at the cost per frame. Looking at 4K, we can see the Aorus Master costs a whopping about $2.20 extra over the PNY. So cost quite a bit, not much of an improvement. And when we look at the 2K, it again costs a tiny bit more, about $1.20 more for 2K as well. So the improvement again, I'd point out, is to the cooler GPU, quieter fans. Okay, not so much, but it costs quite a bit more, especially in Australia, where everything costs an arm and a leg more than what our US counterparts pay. So that basically concludes all the testing. Let's come to point of verdict. So me giving you guys the verdict, it's my opinion. So I see a lot of guys being very rude sometimes, especially with my headphones when I'm doing a headphones review, especially when it comes to Bang & Olufsen's. A lot of their fanboys get really rude. In the end of the day, it is my opinion. This is why you guys are here, because my opinion is unbiased. I don't gain anything by telling you to go for this or that. That is my opinion. So looking at these two cards, the Aorus Master certainly costs a lot more for that extra bit of heatsink it's got on there. But the heatsink does such a good job that it has a 10-degree on average difference. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it goes up to 15 degrees difference, where I've done the same sort of, no, I wouldn't say test, because in tests I have a specific scenario and I do same thing, and I'll do noise normalization and all of this, but just using it, just playing a game. Like so for example, I'll play a session of Fortnite for an hour and I'll notice that there might be a difference of 15 degrees. When I play it on the PNY, the same game, there's 15 degree more, 10 to 15 degrees more. So if that is a very important aspect for you guys, especially if you're not going to undervolt the card, because I've undervolted. When I use it personally, I undervolt them massively and then overclock them a tiny bit as well. So they become quite cool. The cards are quite cool. So that's why I'm saying when I'm playing video games, especially Fortnite, I get only about 40 degrees on the Aorus Master, which is nothing, which is just like idling temperature without the fans on. And when I'm looking at the PNY, it goes up to 52, about 50 to 51, 52 degrees, which is a bit hotter. However, when you look at that price, it's quite a bit more that you're paying for the Aorus Master. Yeah, I think it's off the top of my head about $300 more for the Aorus Master. If you're expecting better gaming in terms of noise and how hot your card gets, then I would recommend that you go the Aorus Master. Or if you're watching this in the future where they have released the next generation of cards and you're finding out a second-hand one, if you're finding out if you can get a second-hand one for a couple of $100 more Aussie for the Aorus Master, I would most certainly get the Aorus Master, me personally. But if you're just wanting to get a card and you're not going to undervolt it, you're going to just play it as normal and you just want the cheapest card, the PNY is a good card. You know, if you want RGBs, you want the LCD panel, Aorus Master. If you want a cooler card, Aorus Master, especially if you're not undervolting it and the card is getting pushed out and you don't have an aggressive fan and the card is heating up, then you would want the Aorus Master because it's going to keep, and at the higher end you'll see a more of a difference. The hotter the cards get, the margin increases, the difference increases between them. So the PNY gets hotter, starts throttling a bit quicker than the Aorus Master. Another thing you gotta have to be aware of, the PNY is a very cheaply built card. It's plastic everywhere, it's light, it's very small, it's cheaply built. It doesn't scream wow, it doesn't have a wow factor. Whereas the Aorus Master is a very heavy card, very big box, everything about it is wow. You know, it basically, I had to take one of the fans off the radiator from my personal computer out to be able to fit that in. With the PNY I don't have that issue. I have plenty of clearance even with the fan in there. So the PNY is a smaller card, it's built for different people who want to save a bit, and you don't really lose out on the performance. It might be a bit louder, but it costs you a lot less. That's basically it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys will be subscribing to this channel. Please do watch more videos, as watching videos really generates the revenue that I need to keep pumping money into this channel, because on average I spend about 40k on this channel and the return that I get from YouTube a measly $1,000 a year. So that's a year per annum. So the more you guys watch this, the more it'll incentivize me to make more videos. I'll have more funds to be able to fund more projects that I want to run for you guys. And if you really like to support me more, you can do the super thanks as well. Anyways, thank you for watching it to the end. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Take good care. Bye bye.